Hello, students, and thank you for selecting this career interview. I am here today with a GCS alumni, Gina Blenis, who is here to talk about her career. So, Gina, if you could tell us a bit about what your career is and then the steps that you had to take to get to where you are now.
Okay, thanks, Kendall, or Mrs. Fritz, for inviting me and letting me be part of this career day. Like Kendall said, I am a GCS alum, 1996, and I had an interest in art ever since I was a student at Greenville, and took as many art classes as I could, and very interested in math, and decided going to art classes and after school art programs that I wanted to pursue a career in architecture. But I also had a interest in old buildings. And so I researched different colleges and decided on the University at Buffalo to pursue my degree in architecture, because at that time it also had a certificate in historic preservation. And so I went out there for 4 years. Unfortunately, while I was there, they discontinued the certificate program in historic preservation, but I decided to continue there and finish my degree. So I have a Bachelor of Professional Studies in architecture, and I need to continue to get a master's degree in architecture or in conservation to continue the registration exam to become an actual licensed architect. So I really enjoyed being out there at Buffalo. It was very hands-on. Did a lot of hand drawing and working in the tech shop, woodwork and stuff like that, making models. So I really enjoyed that. After I graduated from Buffalo, I was able to get a job with a firm, Misa Cohen Wilson Baker Architects, in Albany, New York, and they specialized in historic preservation. And it was really starting there where I really realized exactly what was entailed of becoming a historic preservation architect. We specialize in 17th, 18th, 19th century buildings. And what I do is, like right now, I'm actually at Mount Vernon in Virginia. We study historic buildings and try to determine what the buildings were like when they were first built, or during a certain period of significance, we call it. Maybe there was somebody important that lived there or visited. And so we study the building. We study the building, the walls, the floors, the ceilings, the nails, the bricks, and we get down to every single bit of our architectural elements to figure out what did the building really look like, and then how can we bring it back. So after starting there, I worked for a couple of years with the firm that I'm still with now. Decided that I wanted to go back to school for my master's in building conservation. And so I went to RPI right in Troy, near us in Greenville, and pursued a degree there. It was a 2-year degree. And I have my master's of science, it is actually in building conservation. And that just really honed in on all the skills that I need to look at all of these pieces in a building and put it together. So for me, I feel like my job daily is almost like putting back a puzzle. We have lots of questions. There are always things that we're trying to figure out and we're trying to look at and see what was the building like? How did it change? Why did it change? Why did they do these things? And just trying to figure out how to get buildings restored back to the way they were.
Yeah, You had said that that's what your day is, and that ties in nicely to the next question, which is what is a typical day for you? I see you're on location today. If someone were to have a job like this, what would their day look like?
So another thing that I love about my job is that it's always changing. And so I have multiple projects. So I'm working on multiple historic house museums or private residences. And my day changes every day. Most days, I will admit, are in the office in front of a computer. I began out of college drafting in AutoCAD. And so I was doing a lot of drawings. And as I've worked the last, I don't want to admit how many years, 22 years, I've worked my way up and I'm now a senior project manager at the firm and a building conservator. And so now I deal mostly with clients directly and contractors directly. So there's a lot of communication, a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, and managing of the project, making sure that the project is running smoothly, answering questions that contractors have, and managing budgets, making sure that the project is on budget and also on schedule. So there's a lot of management now at my job. But then there's days like today where I'm able to visit buildings and do what I love most. And that's really looking at the building, looking at the history of it, and trying to figure out what it was like, and what are we going to do to fix it or to make it make improvements to it. So there is quite a bit of travel that's required in my position. Right now, I'm in Virginia. I go to Massachusetts. I've been all over the East Coast because our firm has been really fortunate to have amazing projects. We work on a lot of presidents' houses, so George Washington is one, and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison are others. And then, as well as, like I said, just some really great historic house museums like the Emily Dickinson Museum or Gore Place out in Waltham, Massachusetts. Um, so yeah, it really does vary, and like I said, a lot of the time is spent in the office, and then there is quite a bit of travel.
Yeah, that sounds great. And for someone who's interested in all those things, what a great like culmination, really.
Yeah.
So what do you love most about your job? You've mentioned a lot of things. What do you love most?
For me, what I love most, like I said, it's a puzzle, and I like figuring out what it was and how are we going to fix it. Um, that really is, I I feel like it's almost like this very intimate kind of relationship you get as you start to really study these buildings, and you really just want what's best for them. Um, I I see so many, and I'm sure students you notice too, so many maybe abandoned buildings or dilapidated buildings that to me I still see as beautiful and want to bring back to life. And so that really is just the part that I love most is getting in there, really looking at the building, figuring out how we're going to restore it, and then seeing that come to life. That's the best feeling is when you can see a project come to completion and see it restored.
Yeah, I was going to say what a rewarding outcome,
It
really, to
really
be able to
is.
see that before and after. Yeah.
It really is. And those, and there are so many projects where we don't get to see that because of funding or other factors. And it's just like, oh, it almost breaks my heart. Like it was so close to getting done or to being restored, but I still have hope. Every building that I see that, maybe they don't have the funds right now. Sometimes we have clients that come back to us and are like, we have the money now, let's go ahead with the project. And it's like, yes, all right, we can we can
Gina,
finish
when you talk about this, you can just see like the passion that you have behind like history. It's really cool. I love it.
Yeah,
And probably really important in helping you to be
yeah.
successful in this
So
job.
what was really funny though, Kendall, is when I was a student at GCS, Um, I I wasn't really into history that much, like learning dates and world, not world, but national events. Like the Civil War and different wars. But it's actually funny. Like as I've gotten older and become more and more involved in these historic buildings, I have such a passion for history now that I didn't appreciate when I was a student. But those events and those dates are actually so important to what I do now. Is understanding what was happening nationally really actually affects construction of some of these buildings. So while I didn't
Very,
appreciate it back as a student, I do now.
I'm
And
sure the same can be said for many people about many things relating back to their
right, so it's like
childhood or school, right?
right. So if you're a student and you're like, oh well, I don't like knowing those dates or something like that. Well, maybe it's not impossible to think that you might have a career in something related to history.
I think it's all about making the connections too. It took like connecting history to something that you do love behind the art and the
Yes,
architecture. Like it's all about finding those connections sometimes
yes,
that takes it to the next level.
exactly.
Um, so my next question for you is in regard to skills. If someone were watching this video and had interest in going into historic preservation or an architect, what are some skills that you feel are most necessary to be successful, be that those trainable skills or even those soft skills?
Okay, that's great. So I think skills. I think you need to have some sort of interest or interest in art or architecture. Um, I liked working with my hands, so I think that's actually important because it helps you understand how things are actually constructed when you start working with your hands and working with some of the different architectural elements. But I think it's also important to be detail oriented for this profession because you really need to. Um, there's so many details, and you just really need to be accurate and precise with what you're doing. Um, what are some other skills that I'm like drawing a blank right now? I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's fine. I think it sounds like for becoming an architect too, a lot of those trainable skills will come through the college program that you're going to
Absolutely.
be enrolled
And I
in.
have to say that even now, as we get interns working in our firm or students right out of college, there's a there's such a difference between college and our working profession that there's a lot to learn when you get into the office. Having an interest in computers, in like AutoCAD or 3D modeling, is really important today too. Um, just maybe you don't want to do exactly what I do, but we have people in our office that are very good at 3D modeling and rendering, and we rely on them every day to do some of our work. Um, and there's also, I don't know if we can touch on like just other industries that my field, relates to, but we work a lot with mechanical, electrical engineers trying to get new heating and cooling systems into buildings. Um, and also civil engineers working with the ground. And then there's archaeology. There's so many different, different careers that are out there that tie into architecture or historic preservation that are really, you know, people that we work with all the time and are really critical for success in our job, for the project to be complete and successful.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's also like the tradespeople, the craftsmen that are actually doing the work. We're really lacking in trained and skilled professional craftsmen that know how to detail and do woodworking, carpentry, welding, masonry. masonry is a huge area where we're seeing a deficit in skilled laborers that know, about historic masonry techniques. So there's really so many different careers, if you will, that relate to historic preservation architecture.
Thank you. So, what would you say are and you just mentioned this challenge, would you say that that is the biggest challenge in your job is finding appropriate contractors to work with that relate to the field of historic preservation, or are there bigger challenges?
Um, probably, probably the first challenge for us is always money. it's always it's always the budget for a project. If the client can't raise the funds to do the work that's required, then we don't have a project. But then the next challenge is getting skilled contractors on the job. Very often in my line of work, where we're working on such prestigious projects, we need only the best to be working on these jobs. And it's a handful of people, and less than that we're choosing to go to. It's also a lot are retiring. A lot of these skilled laborers are retiring. So that really is a challenge for us. So I really encourage anybody. It might not necessarily be college that is the direction to go to, but learning a trade is so important right now.
Absolutely, especially in our area.
Yes, yes.
So, this next question, feel free to not necessarily answer directly about you unless you want to. But in general, if someone were thinking about going into architecture, what are the salary ranges in that field? And you yourself have advanced to a higher position. So, obviously, there are opportunities for advancement. But what are some of the ranges that a student could expect?
Yes. Okay. So when I started out, right out of college, so that's about 2000, I started working. It was, I would say, $20 an hour is how I started. And I don't know what that computes to, but um, at this point, I have worked for 22 years. I did actually take some time off to raise my two girls for 7 years, so I have a hiatus in my profession, my salary, I guess. But it can range, I would say, between 60 to 100,000 and per year.
Okay.
Um, so yes, it depends on experience. It depends on skill. Um, and yeah, experience is really the biggest factor in your salary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, my final question for you, and being that you're a former GCS student, this is kind of perfect. Were there any classes that you took when you were a student, when you were in middle school or high school, that you feel truly relate to your career now?
Yes, I vividly remember art classes with Mrs. Flug. I don't know if anybody remembers her or not, but she was the art teacher back then, and she offered after school an after school club for drafting. And this is really going to date me. This was when computers just started to come into the school. And there was one computer in the art department, which is amazing looking back at it now. But there was one computer in the art department, and she had a 3D drafting program, or not 3D. She had a drafting program, and that is when I learned how to use a computer and to start drafting. And we would trace floor plans and building elevations from catalogs, like these house plans that you can find on the grocery store shelves or something. So that is really what sparked my interest, because at that time, junior, senior year, I was deciding between doing interior design or architecture. I knew I had an interest in one of those two fields. I loved design. I was constantly redesigning my room and rearranging my room. My mother would walk in all the time, be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm moving my bed." I played with Legos a lot. I was always building floor plans in Legos. But it was that after school class that was offered that sparked my interest, and I realized I wanted to deal with buildings. I didn't just want to deal with interior design, furnishings. It was the architecture that I was interested in. So
That's great. That's wonderful.
yeah.
And if there's anything more you want to add, I just want to give you that opportunity.
I don't think so. If anybody is interested in this sort of career or anything related to it, I'm more than happy to talk with them or meet with them or anything. I really want to encourage people to go into this field because we need really, experience, and people that are interested. That's the thing. You need to have an interest, a passion for it, and I welcome that. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
We will, and we truly appreciate you volunteering your time to this cause and to sharing your story. And we appreciate the fact that you have offered to continue to stay in touch should anyone have a question. So students listening, if you do have a question, feel free to either email Ms. Blenis or reach out to me because I know how to get in touch with her. Thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.